You are running with the Devils, and we're back talking ASU football. We're happy you took the time out from your Diamondbacks viewing to check us out here on RWD. If you like what you see here, click the like and subscribe button. Comment below. We always love to hear from our fans as we're back talking ASU football. And Big John, got to give a shout out to our brothers over there in downtown Phoenix, the Arizona Diamondbacks, going to the World Series. I know this is an ASU show, and we're going to be talking plenty of ASU football here. But as a lifelong Diamondback fan, I am so thrilled that my team is going to the World Series, and I cannot wait for tomorrow, Game 1. And so got to get that out the way. So Snakes alive, let's go. Embrace the chaos. But we got some ASU football to talk about. I know ASU's kind of taking a back seat with their record right now, but we appreciate you guys still sticking through with us, even though the team's not exactly performing well at the moment, but they're still competitive, Big John. That's the thing you got to remember. This team is still very fun to watch. And I know this Saturday is going to be a fun game against Washington State, but we'll talk about we'll get into that in a minute. Got to talk about last Saturday though, up in Seattle. The ASU defense, I think, might have played its best game in probably 3 years.
Yep.
I'll say maybe the U of A game, and that was against a lame duck team with a lame duck coach.
Mm-hmm.
But last night against the fourth ranked offense overall in college football, ASU basically shut them down, held them to 9 points offensively. They did get that pick six, which ultimately proved to be the difference. But held them to 9 points. 4 turnovers.
Zero offensive touchdowns.
Yeah, exactly. Against Michael Penix looked like the Heisman front runner going into this game, and now he's back with the pack. And just a tremendous effort by Brian Ward and his players, as this defense really looks like it's going to be something special. Especially if they kind of continue to develop the way they have. It seems like they're getting better week in and week out, and they kind of got that. We talked about them needing to force turnovers, and that when turnovers came, they would come in bunches, and they certainly did on Saturday when they got 2 interceptions, they recovered 2 fumbles. Definitely a great effort from this unit.
As I said in the pre-show, we got to find a way to keep Brian Ward on staff and sign him to a long-term deal, because he's the real deal, guys.
Yes.
Really got a hats off to this guy. He really showed the country what he's all about, because remember, he's Pac-12 after dark every week, and this game, while it was a late game for everybody, still everybody got to see that he really showed the rest of the country how to beat Washington going forward. I mean, what a great game plan and execution at really every position group. I thought played really well. I was really pleased with the linebacking group as well as the DBs.
Yeah, I like the D line, even though they didn't generate a sack. Still holding Washington. Even though Washington was more known for their passing attack, their rushing attack was still pretty good coming into this game. Only 13 rushing yards as a team. Right. So definitely a great effort from them. I mean, granted, they only ran the ball about 13 times. They were throwing it because they were behind for most of the game. But at the same time, even, and we'll get into Penix's numbers here in a minute, but the defense doing a great job, forcing pressure, being sure tacklers, just taking advantage of any situation that comes up. I like that they got their hands up and got into throwing lanes. They knocked that one ball one ball down that Shamari Simmons picked off in the red zone. Mm-hmm. That was a huge play, and we said that when the turnovers came, they would come in bunches, and they certainly did on Saturday. That was great to see. So, we'll certainly get into Wazoo this weekend. ASU coming back home. We'll, certainly preview that game here in a little bit. And we'll also talk the ASU offense. Obviously we got to give some love to the defense for their effort, but Kenny, is the offense going to start pulling its weight at some point? I think we'll get into that in a little more detail here on RWD. And but first off, just reviewing last weekend's game. This is the 6th straight loss for ASU. After that opening win over Southern Utah, ASU has now dropped 6 straight. we kind of a lot of both you and I think said 5 and 7. That's looking a little long at this point, but still, it's still a fun team to watch. And we mentioned the defense playing its best game of the year, 5 tackles for loss. We mentioned the 13 rushing yards. Definitely a complete effort from this team. And Shamari Simmons was a big reason why he probably played. I think he played his best game as a Sun Devil. I mentioned him last week, sorry, as a guy who kind of disappeared in games at times.
Right.
But he was definitely in on a lot of plays last week. An interception, a forced fumble, and a fumble recovery. So definitely a great game from him. And speaking of guys who played their best games, I think Caleb McCullough probably had played his best game.
Absolutely, without a doubt. With
the injuries to Travion Brown and Will Schaefer transferring out, Caleb McCullough and Tate Romney kind of stepped into the linebacker spots and definitely played it very, very well. I've been very impressed by Caleb McCullough.
People
He's
need
now
to
a full-time starter, and he played a tremendous game.
Well, let me tell you why it was so tremendous. To me, he played all 3 linebacking positions in that game. That's rare, folks, and especially in D1 football. But it's just the way the cards are being dealt this year. He's playing all 3, and he's playing them well. He does every assignment exactly as he is instructed. I talked to his coach last night. And I also talked to Caleb, and it's kind of like, it's a beautiful thing in college football when the light bulb goes on and suddenly everything starts clicking for a player. It's happening now for Caleb. Okay, so really keep your eye out for him the rest of the season, because I thought that was a breakthrough game for him.
Well, I definitely will. Number 22, if anybody forgets, he's definitely a player to watch on this defense going forward. And
Pacifica High School in Oxnard, baby.
Yes. Speaking of guys to watch out for, Deshaun Mallory, the Michigan State transfer, number 0. He has becoming a force on that D line, especially getting his hands up. He's the one who knocked that ball up in the air that Shamari Simmons picked off deep in ASU territory, and he's becoming a force out there. He also has tackle for loss. Seems like he's playing better week in and week out. So
good
another
technique.
guy who, some of the guys that we talked about on this show week in and week out have been Ro Torrance, BJ Green, D Ford, guys like that. But it was a whole team effort this time, Big John. I think that was the big thing. You had other guys stepping up and playing probably their best game of the season, which is why this defense had just a tremendous effort, I think, out there. And I'll tell you, coming off the bye week, I think that that really helped them to kind of get right. They helped some guys to get healthy.
A little healthy,
and
the
really helped them, focus in on this elite, what we consider to be an elite Washington offense. I mean, both you and I had this going into the score going into the 30s.
Yes.
And ASU definitely went out there and held its own, and the defense played certainly well enough to win. I do think. So
I thought
9 points, 288 total yards, 3 of 11 on third down. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves.
Yes, if you just took away the one play, the pick 6, and you just looked at this what they did on offense, there's no way they could win this game.
And the missed field goals. I think if you add those missed field goals on, take away the pick 6, we're talking about a much different game. We're talking about a huge upset today instead of this narrow defeat.
And had you gone for the 3rd field goal instead of throwing, as they did, but again, we'll explain that in a minute. That we were dinged up, did not have the personnel to run, especially after the block. We knew we couldn't run it again. But we'll talk about the fact that how they actually are fixing this week. They brought some bodies in on defense. We'll talk about one player in particular in a minute. But
and then Michael Penix, who we all thought was going to, after the way he'd been playing of late, looking like the Heisman front runner.
Yeah,
he was 27 of 42, 275 yards and 2 interceptions. Definitely not a Heisman worthy performance.
Well, to think Penix and Caleb Williams both had terrible games last week. Got exposed.
And two in a row for Caleb Williams. Notre Dame and Utah. He's not looked like a number 1 pick.
He doesn't look like a Cardinal pick.
Why you got to go there?
Oh, Okay. Well, you said
but in any case, I mean, the fact that they were able to do this against, and you certainly, I mean, you throw the ball 42 times, you're going to put up some yards. But the fact they kept them out of the end zone, yeah, Polk and Odunze, they got their catches, they got their yards, but his defense showed up when it needed to, and definitely put a hurting on this Washington team. And nobody walked away from this stadium thinking, ASU blew it. ASU
right.
defensively didn't have the horses to keep up with Washington, because they absolutely did. So
you saw the meme I sent you? University of Utah demands partial ownership of whatever NFL team drafts Caleb Williams.
Yes, I know. And
okay.
Yeah, but this is certainly something that I hope this defense continues to play well, because I mean they got some pretty good offenses coming up the next few weeks. Washington State's certainly shown itself capable. You got UCLA, who can certainly move it. Oregon, definitely looks like Bo Nix looks like a first-round pick right now. So this defense is going to continue to be tested, and hopefully they're up to the challenge. I think and with Brian Ward and his staff have done in Tempe after the defense last year was more of just trying to keep everything in front of them, prevent big plays. They were not what you call an elite unit, but this was an elite performance right here. So hopefully they can continue this here through the back half of the season. I'd certainly like to see them continue to play the way they have. So
let me ask you, getting turnovers the way they have, do you think this is kind of like the start of a real identity now for these?
I'd really like to see it snowball, because I think that we mentioned getting the monkey off your back, going out there and just because once the turnovers come, they're going to come in bunches. I hope that carries over into this week. I certainly like to see that. I think that's got to be, if you're a unit like this, like ASU, you can get after the quarterback, but Washington had a really good offensive line, so
but remember,
it was kind of tough for them to generate a lot of pressure. But they were still getting their hands on balls. They were still doing a lot of things really well.
Right.
So,
but remember,
there'll be opportunities there when you're not facing such a good offensive line, and that'll create the opportunity for more turnovers. I think the opportunities will certainly be there.
It sounds from everything I'm hearing, they won't let me back in practice now. I guess they figured out I got a podcast. But it really sounds as if the way they are practicing is the way they're playing. They really drilled on trying to create turnovers last week in practice, and they got a lot of turnovers in practice. So I think what they're instructing is working.
And and we talked about it last week. The big thing that CKD preached was explosive plays.
Yes.
And you think explosive plays, you think offense, but explosive plays on defense.
Oh yeah.
Turn a game just as fast. I mean, look at what Washington did with that pick six.
Oh, that was the game.
That was the turning point. That was the play of the game that ultimately made the difference. They don't make that play, like I said, ASU makes their field goals. We're talking about a much different game today. But I mean, offense, they struggle in the red zone. Those continue here. They had opportunities, especially after the turnovers, and we would have liked to see them go on some longer drives to kind of continue to control. They controlled the clock for the most part, but you would have liked to see that even more lopsided than it was. And just 5 of 17 on third down, not the numbers you necessarily want to see. But hey, Washington's defense, they're pretty darn good in their own right. I mean, everybody talks about their offense, but Washington's defense has got some players on it too. They certainly did not. They didn't give anything up easy, and they certainly made plays when they had to as well. But I think one thing that kind of went under the radar in this game was the return of DeCarlos Brooks, and that was really great to see because he went out with an injury early. We didn't really know what this backfield was going to be at the beginning of the season because you had a lot of bodies, but you had some unproven guys, you had some transfers. You really didn't. You saw talent, but wasn't really sure how it was going to be used. I think DeCarlos Brooks has kind of become as much a Swiss Army knife as Cam Scadaboo.
He runs through.
They'll line him up out wide. They've lined him up out wide. They'll line him up as like a fullback.
Right.
They'll line him up next to Cam Scadaboo. They'll do a lot of different things, and he's been utilized very well. He had himself a terrific game, 10 carries, 63 yards. It was really great as basically the number 2 back, and he turned out to be the leading rusher, and that was really great to see.
I saw a couple of runs that were just blew me away as far as broken tackle, running through tackles, and then throw you a little shimmy shake and get out, kind of go east west on you a little bit sometimes. He was not an easy out. He was very, very ran hard, ran angry at times.
Too.
Yes, he
did. That's
absolutely.
What you love to see. And he's a bigger back, and they I think they've kind of been missing him a little bit. He's such a nice complementary piece to Scadaboo that I feel like you need to get him the ball. Quite a few times, like 10, 15 touches a game. I think would be perfect for him as a nice complementary piece to what you have in Scadaboo. Mm-hmm. So whereas DeCarlos is more of a one cut and go north south kind of power back. Scadaboo, I mean, he's a little more of a patient runner. He'll wait for the play to develop and then hit the hole. You need both. You need each type of back to really have a successful rushing attack. And hey, these guys combined 112 yards. That's 114 yards. That should get it done.
That should have. Yeah.
So and then Cam Scadaboo, of course, had the lone touchdown on the long drive. Would have liked to seen another score at some point. I mean, that was in the first half. Then ASU couldn't find the end zone again. The rest of the game couldn't get on the board. The rest of the game, unfortunately. Elijah Badger, another solid game, 8 receptions, 50 yards. But
a couple of drops.
I'd like to see more. Yeah, a couple of drops. Some. It was slippery out there a little bit. There, it had been raining earlier in the day.
Correct.
So it was
moist.
It was. There was it was moist out there, and the receivers were slipping a little bit, and it was there wasn't an ideal there wasn't ideal circumstances to be playing football out on that field.
No, and Trenton's pick, he threw the receiver slipped on his route, and as I told you in the pre-show, there was no read involved in that play whatsoever. It's a designed catch and quick throw to a spot, and he wasn't there. He wasn't where he was supposed to be.
And Trenton Bourget, I'd like to see a little bit better percentage on that. 26 to 47, 196 yards, and that costly pick 6 late in the game that ultimately proved to be the difference. But to his credit, he did everything he could to try to bring that the DB down when he was on the run back.
He threw himself in front of the trailing lineman to try to get a block in the back, and they didn't call it. But no, Trenton actually, he got the twisted ankle again, walked it off, and came back in the game. Kudos to him for being tough, and not staying out on that one.
And that was another thing that I wanted to talk about was, I mean, there were a couple missed calls as well. ASU's receivers were, they had the jerseys tugged.
Oh,
there were,
tried to exchange
at least 2 or 3 instances where there could have been holding or pass interference that weren't called. Tell me, Pac-12 doesn't want Washington in the playoff.
Oh. Dude, that was as agreed. It was. It wasn't even
for Pac-12 officials.
He ripped and it kept going and grabbed the bottom half of the jersey.
He held him twice.
On one,
I know.
One play. I don't know what they were thinking. Like he's allowed to put his. He put a hand on the guy, but you can't pull the jersey for goodness sake.
Right.
Where in the rules does that apply?
Yeah.
Anyway, enough. Pac-12 refs will be gone. Who knows what these guys? They'll all be selling.
Hopefully, Big 12 refs will be a little bit better.
Yeah. Well, I hope these guys may try to get a job in that conference too, but let's hope not.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah.
But moving on and kind of closing the book here on week 7, kicker is something you never want to see, especially on a struggling team.
Mm-hmm.
Your kicker slumping. Suddenly, Dario Longhetto has got a little case of the yips. He's 1 of 4 in his last 2 games. So 2 on Saturday. One that he just shanked.
Oh,
pretty much. Really should have had.
It was form.
And just straight up missed.
Yeah.
And another one that was blocked. And this is something that I know you wanted to get into, Big John, because we know about we talked about the offensive line injuries on this show before. The depth has kind of been an issue. They just got Isaiah Glass back, but now Bram Walden is hurt.
Right.
We know, about Emmett Boley and Ben Coleman being down for the year. Cade Briggs just got back, but they're still kind of shuffling guys around a little bit. And the O-line depth has definitely been tested. And then in this game, Max Hanajor, the JUCO transfer, who's been playing some big snaps at tackle, he goes out. So yeah, they had to rush some guys out there who really hadn't worked a lot on field goal blocking, and asked them to do something they hadn't really done much of in practice, at least not that week, and led to a blocked field goal.
Well, they knew they were down 2 linemen when it came to special teams, particular special. And then when they were down a third, they said, and then they had the block. They said, we can't go for it. It was too critical. And so you go for 4th down again, which pretty much been our hallmark all year, is going for 4th down in tight situations.
Well, the analytics say you should.
Yeah, but quite frankly, it only takes. I mean, I asked Danny Cush last night, one of the great kickers for ASU. He says, he says, my expectation was to get that thing up in 1 second, not 1.5. Yeah. They now talk about 1.5, because in my day it was 1 second. It was even quicker. And he goes, we got to have some big defensive linemen we can throw in there. So it turns out this week they move CJ.
Well, and he's a big enough body. I mean, all he really has to do is just get in front of somebody. You don't even need him to block, just necessarily. Just stand in front of somebody long enough to not get in the kicking lane. I mean, that's really all you need him to do, as big of a body as he is. So I really think that this is something that hopefully the injuries will kind of subside at some point, and this won't be an issue going forward. But at the same time, Dario Longhetto, it's always a problem when you have a slumping kicker.
It is.
Ask some of these NFL teams that are trying out kickers this week.
What is with the NFL this year and all the kicking problems? My goodness, seems like there's just more than usual.
There's no reason. It makes now you know why coaches are going for it on 4th down all the time. Because they don't have any faith in their kicker, and some of them were kicking last week. I don't blame them. Even though Josh Carlson lost the punting job, he's still a holder, so that hasn't changed.
Right.
Hopefully they'll get these blocking issues squared away, and this won't be an issue through the rest of the season. Fingers crossed on that one, because special teams truly is a third of the game, and if that's getting messed up for whatever reason, it's not a good sign, especially on a team it's 1-6 right now.
Yeah.
Last thing you need is another problem.
Yeah. By the way, I thought our special teams, our punt, when we punted the team we sent down, they get a great coverage. Oh
yeah,
great job.
And Roman Odunze is one of the most dangerous returners in college football, and the way that they were able to cover him,
absolutely,
they kicked it away from him a couple times too. But the fact that they were able to, they pinned him inside the 20 a couple times, which is great. Definitely the punting game, which was an issue earlier in the season, has definitely taken a turn for the better thus far, and I'm perfectly happy with where it is right now.
Yeah, well, that's a tribute to Regal, Coach Regal.
I don't know about you, Big John, but I'm a little tired of doing a What We Learned segment on this show.
Yeah,
6 straight shows now we've done what we learned segment. I'm ready to do. I want to do players of the game. I want a victory. I don't know about you.
I'm really pulling for players of the game and helmet stickers, man. Okay.
Well, and we, of course, we will do that after a win, but after a loss, we got to do what we learned. Hopefully, we'll be able to, not make the same mistakes again, and apply this going forward. But and we talked about it in the first segment, when the D forces turnovers, for me this week, when the D forces turnovers and stops the run, they can play with anybody. And I truly believe that. Now you got Washington State coming in here. That's not a big running team. They love to throw the ball. They're a true air raid offense. They love to throw the ball. Can the DBs bring their A game? And because Cam Ward's been struggling lately, that quarterback. He had a great first 4 games. He's going to struggle the last 3 that they've lost. Can the DBs go out there and play their game? The Washington State offensive line's been vulnerable this year. Can the front get after the quarterback, sack him a few times, force some mistakes? That's what I want to see. You had a great game against Washington. Now you got to continue to do so. Carry that over. Be consistent week in and week out as a unit. And
to reinforce
I truly believe that when this D forces these turnovers, they can absolutely play with anybody. You can put any offense you want out there. If you're forcing turnovers and you're turning them into a one-dimensional offense,
right?
You give yourself a great chance to win.
Think about it. Had we got 4 turnovers in the USC, Cal, or Colorado games, we win those 3 games.
Going away, absolutely. By multiple scores.
Because you know why? You take the ball away 4 times from them, 4 less chances to score.
Definitely.
And those were 1-score games, folks.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's a huge part of the game.
Yeah, and hopefully ASU's kind of found the formula that works to start generating some of those turnovers, because 1 turnover through the first 6 weeks wasn't getting it done. And now we said once they start forcing some turnovers, they'll start winning some games.
That's right.
Well, they forced the turnovers, but they didn't get the win, unfortunately. But I still think that if you're able to maintain that level of performance, the wins will come. And now the offense, still struggling with consistency and execution, especially in the red zone. It's kind of been an issue, feels like, for most of the season. I mean, they really haven't had a performance that you can hang your hat on and say, hey, this offense is going to be fine. It's going to be an elite unit going forward. And you look at, basically since the first half, they played good halves, but they really haven't been able to put together a complete game. I mean, they haven't even cracked the 30-point mark at any point this season.
But
so you have to wonder, when is this offense going to kind of turn a corner and start putting some points on the board?
But when I look at 13 men on the field down in the red zone or down on the goal line. When I look at
that was against Cal.
Yeah, and I look at some bad ref, some bad calls by refs, and then I look at really the whole notion of you're right, it is execution in the end, but some of it's not the playmakers. It's 13 men on the field, penalties, bad calls. Those things will contribute to those losses, and they did. And I think
it's not all. I'm not saying it's all the players, because it's not.
That's right.
And those are things that again, but execution and consistency also applies to the coaching staff.
That's right.
It's not just the players, believe me.
Yeah.
And some of that stuff, you can work on and practice it, and in the film room, and it can get worked out. It can get coached out of you. But at the same time, the coaching staff has got to have its head on straight during the course of the game. And hopefully, that's something that we mentioned, this coaching staff going through its growing pains, and that's part of it. That's in-game situations like this, you kind of have to own up to your mistakes, take responsibility, and say, hey, this isn't going to happen again. And it's still stuff that it's going to happen with this young team, a team that's still finding itself, finding its identity. And we said this was going to be a rebuilding year, and there's going to be growing pains, there's going to be kinks, there's going to be mistakes that you think what shouldn't happen, but they do. And that's part of the growth of a young team.
We always talk about the 1% plays, right, that happen in football.
Of course.
And there's been 3 of them in the last 3 weeks. To me, they're 1% plays. And while we both said 5 wins was doable, on paper, I really do believe 5 was very doable. And you look at the performance of this team and say, yeah, the ball bounced one way or another. You got to call one way or the other. You're going to have 13 men on the field. Some of these things, guys,
you should have probably have 4 or 5 right now.
Four wins by now what could have happened. And I know we're going to do the woulda, coulda, shoulda thing, and we can't do that because it's
on a 1-6 team. You're going to do that though.
You're going to
do that.
It's how fast we can put it behind us now, and and figure it out. So, yeah, we're still struggling on offense, and for me, I didn't think we could play any of these games any closer and not get a victory. Yet they proved me wrong, right? It's kind of like that
And
margin
for
that little margin
long
got tighter.
time Valley residents, and I'm gonna bring up kind of a painful topic here, but this is something that I've said for a few weeks now. They kind of remind me of the Cardinals of the '90s and the early 2000s, back when they were competitive. They looked like they played well enough to win, but they just made those 1% plays, those few plays there in crunch time or at the wrong time that ultimately proved to be the difference and led to a loss. And it seemed like they'd have at least 4 or 5 of those games a year that made the difference between them, picking in the top 15 and competing for a wild card spot.
And quite frankly,
that's what ASU feels like right now. They're not. It's just those 1% plays that are. Or that the execution's not happening on a consistent play-by-play basis. It's got to be a complete. That's what playing a complete game is all about. It's got to be start to finish. There can't be any lull or any lapses in the middle. It's got to be whistle to whistle. 15 to 15.
Right. You got to learn. A lot of people like to complain about refs and how refs are really hard on the ASU. We get our I don't believe we're penalized anymore. There's no bias.
Not
I think
what goes than other teams.
But what the great teams figure out is how to play well enough to overcome the bad calls, right?
Totally.
And you're going to get a couple
they don't put the game in the refs' hands.
That's right. So the point is, you might get 1, 2, 3 bad calls in a game that really could kill you. You have to have 3 more possessions, 3 more opportunities, and go execute. That's what separates a bowl team and a non-bowl team, a winning team and a losing team, quite frankly. So to me, it's stuff like that. So, and my second real thing I learned was, you can see the improvement. You can see it all over the places. Caleb McCullough, my goodness, playing every single linebacking spot and playing well. To me, that just jumped. Got guys like DeCarlos Brooks coming in playing hard after being off. Those were all improvements.
Yes.
We were not that we didn't have that many procedure penalties or holding penalties. I like how we clean it up, but as Kenny calls it, we got to clean the bus, meaning the offensive bus is real clean is real dirty right now, and the defensive bus is real clean. It's just analogized to who's got the most work to do after the game.
Well, so I think it was certainly obvious that it was the offense this week, but there's always room for improvement, and but I think the improvement is palpable. I think that this team, they're on the cusp of doing something well, doing something good, and we singled out a few games at the beginning of the season and said, hey, if ASU can pull off an upset in XYZ game, that's something that they can build on going forward, that they could hang their hat on and say, hey, we did this, we can do it again. There's no reason we can't go out and do it again.
Right.
I think that they're not necessarily waiting, but they're working towards that. They're working towards that moment, that dare to be great moment. And it's staring them right in the face, and they just need to take that little step forward to bask in it. And I still think it's coming. I think it's coming this year. I'd like to see it happen, against like UCLA or Oregon, one of those ranked teams.
Yeah, right.
And say, hey, if we can play with these guys, we can play with anybody, and give them that confidence in themselves going forward. I feel like that moment is still on the horizon, and it's going to happen this season. It just, it's you can take it's so close you can taste it.
Well, and I hope they can visualize just how raucous it's going to be in that locker room when they do win. After 6 lots, you know what I'm saying? I think there's a lot
that tension building. That tension is absolutely building. After 6 straight losses, it's building up inside you. I've been there.
They've not quit. They could easily have quit. Easily have quit by now.
No,
easily have thrown in the towel.
You do not see that in them right now.
No,
absolutely not. There's no there. Despite what happened at Fresno State, the team did not quit on anybody in that game. And after a game like that, you could have folded up the rest of the season and said, "Hey, it's over. We're done." why bother? But they haven't done that. They've gone out and played hard, gave 100% every single time. I truly believe that, and I think they'll continue to do that through this back half of the schedule. There really hasn't been any indication, that they won't. So, I'm still going to go out there and support this team, and I hope you guys do too. So that's what we learned this week, presented by the Valley Athletic Booster Club. Support local athletics and check out valleyathleticboosterclub.com. Now, just kind of putting a bow on week 7 and transitioning into week 8, as we do every week here on RWD. Kind of one of our talking point of the week, and I think the big one this week is, what does the offense need to do to get on track? Because they've really struggled this year. I mentioned it earlier. They haven't cracked the 30-point mark at all this year. They had 28 against USC. That was their season high.
Right.
They've had 27. I think they had 24 against Colorado, but they haven't. They got to crack. I think that was always kind of the benchmark for a long time in college football. It was 30 points. You really had to get to in order to win. More recently, it's kind of become the 40-point mark.
40 to get in the playoffs.
Yes. 40 points consistently would get you into one of the big bowls more often.
Those are style points.
Yeah, exactly. And where's the liability lie? And it has the offense become a liability, I should say. And in this game, it felt like they were at times, especially after that pick 6. But where does the offense go from here, Big John? After a game like this, they only score 7 points. Granted, Washington's defense is no slouch. They have guys too. They have some guys on that unit that are definitely going to be playing in the NFL. This is a solid unit that they went up against, but you still need to see them get more than 7 points. And we mentioned the missed field goals. We mentioned the pick 6. We mentioned them going for it on 4th down. But where do they go? How do they take that experience and try to improve moving forward?
Well, I think there are playmakers on this team who we have not gotten the ball in their hands enough, quite frankly. And I think we're going to try. I think you're going to see Xavier or everybody focuses on Gilroy, and so we focus on Badger and Conyers a lot, and the fact that they have not been 90% catching, to me, says
Conyers I thought played one of his better games this week, because they found a way to get him the ball in space and make some plays after the catch.
He got healthy.
Yeah,
he got healthy.
The bye week certainly helped him. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but there's some guys like O'Meary, Gio, Bryce Pierre, and Stovall, who all need to get the ball, I think. And I think I would look to. While you always want to get the ball in your playmakers' hands, where has Swinson been in the last 3 weeks?
He's been around. I mean, they've been using Ryan Morgan a lot more as like an H-back type of lead blocker.
I did see Swinson lay a great block in the last game. He blew up the DN coming around one time. Did a great job on.
So, but I to a certain extent, I think Bryce Pierre's style just kind of fits a little better with some of the schemes that they're trying to run and whatnot.
Right.
I think Messiah is a guy that you certainly got to look for in the red zone. That's his specialty to me. He's a guy who's such a mismatch in the red zone.
I haven't seen us do that.
You got to run some plays for in the red zone. And I think that's kind of been their red zone part of the problem. Their red zone struggles. They've been just a little bit too vanilla in the red zone. They're trying a little bit too hard to run it between the tackles. They're not utilizing their speed or their athleticism or especially the size advantage that they have in some. But I'll tell you, I think one thing you saw this in the Colorado game. They went to Troy O'Meara in a big situation right there, and they're kind of force feeding him the ball as as a guy who can go up and get it. Those jump balls, 50-50 balls. They're looking for him in the end zone right now. I think that he's a mismatch issue. But I think you also got to look at Messiah and Jalen Conyers, and they've looked at Conyers a couple times as well, but they haven't been able to hook up and make it happen on a consistent basis. But again, I think you're right. I think there are underutilized playmakers. You got a guy like Stovall, who's got elite speed. They stretched the field a couple times with Rashada when he was out there. I mean, Bourget doesn't have his arm talent, but he can still sling it a little bit down the field, find a way to get the ball in Stovall's hands in space. and I think that he's a guy who can make things happen for you after the catch. So
Yeah.
I think that this kind of goes back to the coaching thing, the play calling. It's kind of flip flop between Bo Baldwin and Kenny Dillingham back and forth a little bit. Dilly kind of took things over again in Washington at one point, and does he take it over here against Washington State? And can the offense go out there and play a 4-quarter game where they're putting points up on the board and not just winning a game, but putting it out of reach in crunch time? I think that's the thing. They've had leads in all these games. All these games they've lost, they've had leads at one point or another. Now can they go out and extend that lead and kind of put it out of reach for a team?
I'm gonna give you just one player I think who's been underutilized but can get in the seam right behind the linebacker is Gio Sanders to me. I mean
he doesn't have blazing speed.
No,
which I think is kind of back, and that's why Stovall's kind of been the primary slot receiver. But the thing I like about Gio, he's such a smart receiver. He's a smart guy. He knows when to sit down. He knows what route to run. He knows when to break off his route, which is very helpful. Which is why he's usually open, kind of between the zone, underneath the zone, like
that's what I'm talking about. Right there.
Yeah, and that's
when they're not.
And he was utilized that way very well last year. He hasn't been utilized as well this year in that role, but they were feeding him the ball a little bit more against Colorado. But I think the opportunities need to be there for him to continue to
we have
to build that role.
Two of our defensive coaches came, and we're going to get into this in just 1 second, came from the Wazoo program last year. And while there's no guarantee, they're not running the same system. It's a little more straightforward.
Well, no. Wazoo's got new. And not only do they have a new defensive coordinator because Brian Ward is here, they got a new offensive coordinator too.
Right.
So definitely more new scheme on both sides of the ball.
The personnel and tendencies and athleticism stuff is known to the staff already. So that's very useful. So let's get into Wazoo, shall we?
Yeah, and we'll get so this week, obviously the Washington State Cougars coming to Tempe for the last time as a Pac-12 opponent. We don't really know what Washington State's where they're gonna be next year, them and Oregon State. But Washington State, I mean, they started out so well. They started out 4-0. They beat Wisconsin in Madison.
Right.
Then they beat Oregon State at home. They were at number 13 in the nation at one point. I was
surprised by that.
Then they've lost. They've gone out and lost the last 3. They got beat by UCLA, who was also ranked. They got embarrassed by U of A, 44-6.
Wow.
A couple weeks ago, and then they go out and lose. And then the game against Oregon last week at Autzen it's a little bit misleading because they only lost by 14, but Oregon kind of took their foot off the gas in the 4th quarter. And Washington State scored a touchdown with about a minute to go and went for 2, which turned a 22-point game into a 14-point game with less than a minute to go. So the game was basically out of reach at that point. But Jake Dickert, since he came in as the interim coach a couple years ago, he's had success. He's had nothing but success for the most part. And this is the first kind of stretch of adversity, I think it feels like he's faced since he got to Pullman. And, the offense has been the issue. And that's always been the hallmark of Washington State, has been their offense, their ability to put points on the board. And they're averaging less than 16 points per game in these last 3 that they've lost. And
it's become very one-dimensional at that.
Yes, and that's been the problem, is that they're kind of gone back to the old Washington State air raid, the Hal Mumme, Mike Leach air raid, where they just throw, run to keep the defense honest, then throw some more. So that's kind of what they've gone back to, and I think that their team has struggled as a result. But like we mentioned, Brian Ward, the ASU defensive coordinator, was the DC last year at Wazoo. And he put together one of the best defenses in the Pac-12 at a school that was never really known for its defensive prowess. And when he came to Tempe, we thought this was a huge get, and it's paid dividends so far, because especially after you watch what happened last week, this defensive unit looks like they've kind of found their stride a little bit under the direction of Brian Ward. And, he brought A.J. Cooper, the former Wazoo linebackers coach, to fill in the same role here. And so, yeah, you mentioned these guys, they coached a lot of those players that are on the Cougars.
Yeah.
Tell me they don't have some insight into what their strengths and weaknesses are, and how
they recruited these kids.
ASU's offense this week.
Yeah, they know their tendencies. They know that they recruited them.
Yeah,
but no,
we mentioned this is this will be Washington State's last visit to Tempe. There have been some good matchups with the Cougars over the years. Those first few years under Mike Leach felt like ASU kind of had their number. I remember that game in 2013 it was, or 2014, I beg your pardon, when ASU had just lost to Oregon State and Jalen Strong was hurt. And they went out there and Cameron Smith had a huge game. Right. And it looked like, going into that U of A game, ASU was going to come out on top of the Pac-12, but that was a really good game. I also remember 2019 when Jaden Daniels, calling his own number and rushing 16 yards up the middle and getting, taking the hit at the goal line and spinning into the end zone against the Cougars. That was another great moment. Brandon Ayuk had a tremendous game in that year, tremendous game in that matchup, and pretty much cemented his first round status with a nice game as well.
For me, the year that they're the COVID, or the year where they lost their head coach because he wouldn't take the vaccination, and they bring in the interim coach, and they rallied, and the kids,
their first game, that was their first game here under the interim coach in 2021.
What an effort! And it was clear that the players wanted to play for him, and the parents I talked to all said, "This is the guy. We can build around this guy." So, kudos to them for not doing the politically correct thing and going finding some big name coach, right? Which is tough to do.
Retread or what have you.
It's hard to do that in Pullman, man.
And promoting from within has been interesting. It's been very hit or miss, and it can be, especially in college football. It's such an emotional time when you lose your head coach. And promoting from within, it can work, but at the same time, it's very hit or miss. I look at Bill Stewart at West Virginia when he took over for Rich Rodriguez. He just led the team to a Fiesta Bowl win over Oklahoma, and the players were all behind him. The alumni were all behind him. Everybody wanted him as the head coach, and he gets hired. 2 years later, he's out of a job because the team wins like a combined 6 games the next 2 years.
Right.
So sometimes it can be a little bit hit or miss. And then you got the Florida State situation where Jimbo Fisher was groomed for years by Bobby Bowden to be his heir apparent, and takes him to a national championship. So sometimes in the right situation, it can absolutely work. But Devils will end up winning the all-time series against Washington State as Pac-12 opponents, 24-14 with 2 ties. Both those ties coming in Tempe, oddly enough. But 16-5 Devils record in Tempe against the Cougars. And as we move on here, Washington State's offense, they've gone back to running a true air raid. It seemed like they were running the ball, pretty consistently. It seemed like it was more of a balanced team there for a while, but they've really gone back to throwing the ball more and more. When you look at the whole season, 33 points per game, it's pretty good. But again, they're averaging about 18 in these last 3 games that they've all lost. And it starts with their quarterback. And it looked like Cameron Ward, through those first 4, it's really been a tale of two seasons for this team, because they're, the first half of the season, first 4 games, they looked tremendous. They looked like a legit top 25 team. These last 3 games, they just look awful. And I think that the word's kind of out on what Washington State is and what they're, especially offensively, what they're doing. But Cameron Ward's still having a solid year for himself, 70% completion.
2,200 yards, man.
2,200 yards, that's right.
Wow.
And along with 15 touchdowns.
That's a
against
great
just 3
season for a lot of
interceptions.
guys. Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah.
in this conference, that's a good season.
But when you're throwing the ball, 40, 50
Right.
times a game,
Right.
you better have some decent stats.
Yeah.
And that's kind of become this team's MO. I mean, you look at their leading rusher, Nakia Watson, 59 carries, 173 yards, and 4 touchdowns on the year. He's got more receiving yards than he does rushing yards. What does that tell you? That's an air raid running back for you, a guy who gets the ball thrown to him a lot out of the backfield. And then Cameron Ward's their second leading rusher.
131 yards. Yeah.
For 131 yards and 3 scores. So
right.
This has been a team that's kind of gone back to their air raid roots with that Hal Mummy, Mike Leach type of offense that's very reliant on using the pass and then just running to kind of keep teams honest when they least expect it.
Right.
More than anything. But
yep.
another issue that's been that's cursed Washington State this year has been their offensive line. Their offensive line had been much improved over the last few years, but this year Cameron Ward's been sacked 19 times through 7 games. So that's certainly something that you can exploit if you're ASU's defense. If I'm them, I'm pinning my ears back and coming after Cam Ward with everything that I've got. Definitely got to keep him in the pocket though, because he's a guy who can be a dual threat, who likes to go out and get out on the run, and he's athletic enough to certainly make it happen. I would consider him a legit dual threat quarterback out there. So definitely got to keep him in the pocket, keep him contained, and don't let him beat you with his legs, because he can certainly do it. So, just getting into the kind of the strength of Washington State's team, their receiving core. And Kenny Dillingham talked about a guy who can absolutely wreck an opposing defense in wide receiver Lincoln Victor, a guy who's, for a couple of years now, since he transferred in from Hawaii, has really been a mainstay in this receiving core and a go-to receiver for Cam Ward. 44 receptions, 522 yards, and 3 touchdowns so far on the year. And he and Kyle Williams have kind of become 1 and 1A out there. And he's another guy. He's kind of a bigger guy. Lincoln Victor is only about 5'9", whereas Kyle Williams is closer to 6 foot. 38 catches, 549 yards, and 4 touchdowns. And then Josh Kelly is a guy who's kind of become that third, that third banana. The guy who's he managed to find himself open, and Cam Ward usually gets him the ball. 32 catches, 433 yards, and 5 touchdowns on the year. So the ASU secondary, this is going to be a big test for them. They're definitely going to need to bring their A game after having a solid game against UW. They come up with another tough matchup against Washington State this week, and they're definitely going to need to be on their A game. This is I think a big opportunity for ASU's linebackers when they drop into coverage, getting those passing lanes, because one of the main concepts of the air raid is the slant, and that's one thing that Washington State loves to run. They love to run those combinations with slants over the middle. So you got to get your hands in those passing lanes. The linebackers are going to have to have clear eyes and play another great game, just like they did a week ago.
So 12 of their 15 touchdowns are right here. Then these 3 guys. And then Cam,
they don't like in true air raid fashion. They don't use the tight end all that much.
No,
their leading tight end is Cooper Mathers, who's only got 8 catches on the season with no touchdowns. So they really only use the tight end again to keep teams honest. Kind of when it's like a sneak attack when you least expect them. There he is, more than anything.
And the fact that Cam Ward has 3 rushing touchdowns, and I believe they're all down in the red zone. There's nothing big he's had, so they're all.
Yeah, I mean I don't think he's got a long. As long as 22 yards, which I don't even know if that went for a touchdown. So
all the TDs
he can still. I mean, he hasn't run for a long touchdown this year, but he can still get out and run when he has to.
Right.
And to extend plays, and if nothing's there downfield, take off and run, and tuck it and run when he has to. So that's certainly got to. I think you got to keep him in the pocket and generate some pressure on him, because we have to, especially after putting up a goose egg in the sack column against UW, as well as that defense played, forcing 4 turnovers with no sacks.
Right.
That certainly says something to me. Now you got to pin your ears back and get after it a little bit, especially after the game they had against Colorado, the pass rush had against Colorado. Now I think that you got to get back to killing the quarterback.
So I'm thinking down inside a 10-yard line, you got to have a linebacker spy in that Cam Ward, just because of the run threat.
Yeah, definitely, and especially if he's playing back far enough, he can still play the middle zone.
That's right.
Keep it against the passing rate. Read the quarterback size. Just play that kind of that shortstop position and just kind of read and react out there. I think that's definitely a good idea. Something that Caleb McCullough and Tate Romney can certainly do. So Washington State's defense, they've been a little bit exposed this year at times, giving up 30 points per game, 162 rushing yards per game is something else. And they do run a true 4-2-5 scheme with 5 true defensive backs. But one of the guys out there who's really had a solid season is Kyle Thornton, their weak side linebacker. Leading tackler, 54 tackles and to go along with a sack this year. He's had himself a nice season. And then the safeties have kind of been the strength of this team. This team's strength is their pass rush and their secondary, really. And their safety, Sam Lockett, third. He's got 2 interceptions on the season. And Jaden Hicks, he's a guy, he plays strong safety, but he looks like a linebacker out there. He looks like he's about 6'3", 215. He plays that line he'll come down in the box. He plays that true strong safety spot very, very well. And he's filled up the stat sheet with 1.5 sacks, 4 pass deflections, a pick 6 on the year, 4 fumble. So he can definitely get after it. And a guy kind of reminds me of Dayon Buchanan a little bit, another former Washington State DB, who ended up playing linebacker in the NFL. So this is certainly a unit that has its strengths, but has been exposed at times, especially up front with their struggles in stopping the run. So certainly something that I think plays into ASU's hands. They can get after it. And then I mentioned their pass rush. 2 guys who wreaked havoc on ASU last year up in the Palouse, Ron Stone III and Brennan Jackson. These guys combined for 6.5 sacks. They've forced fumbles. They've recovered fumbles so far this year. They've been very disruptive. So ASU's tackles are going to need to be on point because when they let these guys off the chain, they get after it with as good as anybody in the nation. And then just rounding out Washington State's defense, they're 2 very experienced corners in Cam Lampkin and Chow Smith-Wade, 2 guys who don't have an interception between them this year, but 13 pass defense on the season. Very, very impressive. They definitely get after it. So they're hungry for an interception because they've been shut out so far this year. So that brings us to our keys to the game, presented by Sleep in Heavenly Peace, a great nonprofit that builds beds for families in need. Check out Sleep in Heavenly Peace and give them your support. My keys to the game has got to be ground garrison. I mentioned Washington State's defense's struggles in the running game, stopping the run, 162 yards on average given up per game. I feel like this is an opportunity for ASU's offense to get downhill a little bit with that rushing attack, especially with a healthy DeCarlos Brooks. You know what Cam Scadaboo can do. Now you got to go out there and take advantage of a unit that is not all that strong up front. And, that goes back to, kind of a similar game plan to what they had last week. Maintaining possession, sustaining drives, keeping those chains moving, keeping that clock moving, and keeping that Wazoo offense on the sideline. That, to me, is a formula for victory.
And so give me a total yardage number in our run game that looks like victory. If you get to 150, 180,
I think right at Wazoo's season average, right about 166. If you go anything over that, anything over like 170, I feel like that's going to be a formula for success. Like you're running the ball enough times and gaining enough yardage
and time of possession.
Yes, and maintaining time of possession. Yes, especially if you have, like, let's say maybe 10 minutes more time of possession. I absolutely believe that if that's the case, ASU's coming out on top in this game. And then I mentioned, Cam Ward. He's the strength of that offense. He's having a great season, 70% completion. If you can generate some pressure, collapse the pocket on him, and keep him contained. And Deshaun Mallory and company have been really good about getting their hands up at the line, even if they're not generating pressure. They're tipping balls and creating opportunities for guys on the back end, just like they did against Washington. They can do that in this game. I like Cam Ward to throw 2 interceptions. I feel like that's another key to success. If you can generate at least 2 turnovers in this game, and also maintain possession, that's going to be that's also plays into
you don't care if it comes off the tip. You don't care if it's a straight pick or through a tip.
And that's why they practice the tip drill in practice.
That's
every
right.
single week. There's no reason that you can't, that doesn't come into play in the game. So
right.
I absolutely believe that'll be the case, and especially with all the slants, the crossing routes, everything over the middle that Washington State likes to run, you can get your hands up into throwing lanes and knock some of those balls up in the air. Somebody's going to come up with them. Maybe Jordan Clark. We haven't seen a big play from Jordan Clark so far this year.
He's
with
back.
The ball in his hands.
We got him back. Yeah, the bye did him good.
Yes.
So it did a lot of guys good. It couldn't have come at a better time. But I agree completely with your game plan. I think without seeing it, it's always tough because to me it's time of possession as another big one, because you want to keep this pass first offense off the field. And then on offense, we're clearly gonna run to set up the pass. And if we do that, we will win. And then again, just like you're saying, we got to contain them, making them uncomfortable. Get hands up. Don't nothing. You get those hands up, folks. You're going to get picks. You're going to get balls up in the air. And then the key really is we got to really focus on Victor and Williams. Those two guys they're averaging 12, almost 12 and 13 and a half yards per catch. These are big big play receivers. You talk about big gashing plays. These are the guys that can get them for them. And so yeah, we're going to have to really focus on shutting those guys, containing them, getting behind those guys and not letting them get the big play on you. So
yeah, and it's kind of like similar to what to last week with Polk and Odunze. That the quarterback's going to look for them.
Yep.
And they're going to get their catches. They're going to get their yards. As long as they're not, too many big plays for touchdowns, you can probably live with whatever they get.
Right. So, hey.
So that's our keys to the game. Sorry, do you have anything?
No, I just think it's. I think what we just did last week helps us a whole lot with this particular game, because both teams, throw the ball. Both teams are known for their offense. Of late, though, Wazoo's having problems, so let's take advantage of that.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. Okay. So that leads us into our score predictions, and I guarantee, and I promise you, we did not collude on this. We don't talk about this before we put them into print. I feel like this is a get right game for ASU with the way Washington State is struggling. I feel like they can go out there and put some points on the board. Don't know if they crack the 30 mark. I think that if they do, they'll definitely win this game. But I think that they put some points on the board in this one, and they come away with the 27-23 victory.
Yeah, it's remarkable. We're very close. I
we're on the same wavelength. That's why we host a podcast.
Well, I'm thinking it's last week I was really off. I knew Washington liked to put up points. I thought maybe we're going to get caught in a boat race and we're going to try to keep up with that. Nowhere close. It turned out to be a defensive game, which was brilliant. I loved great defense.
Which you would think would play into ASU's hands a little bit.
Yeah,
and it almost did.
It almost did, and that margin of victory is getting smaller and smaller by our opponents. It's remarkable. As I said, what we learned. I didn't think we could find a way to get even closer to lose, and we found yet another way even closer to lose it. So I think the point I made to you in the pre-show was that if you're going to pull off a win here in the back half of the season, this to me, I've had this circle for a while, was probably the most doable in terms of the wins that are of the games remaining.
We weren't sure, and this was a few weeks ago, so we weren't sure what Washington State was going to be, especially after 38 points to U of A.
Oh man.
Well, yeah. So
we're going to talk about U of A
they're
in a few
struggling
weeks.
for real right now. Even though they did hang with Oregon a little bit last week at times, for the most part, that game really was never that close.
Right.
So, but that's expected. Oregon's the number 9 team in the nation. That shouldn't come as any surprise. But one thing I want to point out though, don't be a get right game for Wazoo either. Because they've seen what ASU, they see ASU's record. They see this is an opportunity for them to kind of right the ship of their season. Don't be that team. Don't be that team that lets them come back in and find their confidence and find their stride again. Harass them. Don't give them anything easy. Keep them. They're down right now. They've lost 3 in a row. Keep them down. That's a big thing for me this week. And especially if they can go out there and start fast, punch them in the mouth from the get-go, get a stop and a score right off the bat. That's going to be huge for ASU's chances of winning this game as well.
Yeah, they've got some an interesting back half of the schedule. They've got Stanford next, Cal, Colorado, and then the Apple Cup.
Yeah, the Apple Cup. Well, yeah, that to me is not. I mean, I guess you could call it interesting. To me, it's not that competitive, especially given what we've seen out of those teams. Although, Stanford, beating Colorado, when stranger things have happened, certainly, especially if Washington State loses this game, they go into that back half of the schedule. You don't really know what's going to happen with them going into the rest of the season. So that promoting from within curse might be rearing its ugly head a little bit now that this team's kind of had to be on its own without the previous regime's players for a while, and they're kind of going. I don't know if that was necessarily the right move to go back to a true air raid, because they were much more balanced before, and now they're kind of going back to that, throwing the ball 40, 50 times a game. I don't know if that works necessarily in college football anymore.
Yeah. What's interesting, Ryan, the fact that both of us took ASU, which we haven't been doing all year.
We both took UW last week.
Yeah, but the over-under is 51 points, and both of us are at 50. I just saw that. And 2, folks, this game opened up at.
We know what we're talking about. Go figure.
Yeah, well, this game opened at 7.5, and I think because when people go back and look at the film of what we did defensively, it's gone to 5.5.
Yeah.
Right? ASU's now at 5.5 points. So we don't talk about spreads a lot. 5.5 is one score, folks. That's 6 points when you win. I mean, so my goodness,
that's Washington State's favored.
That's right. Wazoo is favored by 5.5. They opened at 7.5.
ASU wins, obviously they cover. So
what I'm saying is, I think the country is waking up after that game last week, and the money line has moved it to 5.5 from 7.5. There's a lot of people who are becoming ASU converts because we have covered every week for the last 4 weeks or 4 games.
We've been such huge underdogs in a few games. I mean, last week against Washington, we were 26.5 point underdogs, and we almost won the friggin' game. So, I think ASU, Vegas is getting wise to ASU.
Right.
The betting world is getting wise to ASU as far as their ability to cover and make games close.
Exactly. So, that's exactly my point.
I totally agree. So that'll do it for this week on RWD. Of course, 5 p.m. kickoff from Tempe. Hopefully you can make the game. If not, it'll be on Pac-12 Network. I'm looking forward to it, Big John. Really, after a few weeks off, especially with all those home games that we had to open the year. ASU coming back home. They'll have a couple weeks off. They'll have a couple weeks back on the road against UCLA and Utah before coming home for the final 2 against Oregon and U of A. So definitely getting into the home stretch of the season here. Weather's starting to cool down a little bit, so no excuse not to get out to Sun Devil Stadium on Saturday. Still plenty of good tickets available. Of course, rest in peace, Mike Leach.
I miss Mike Leach, I swear.
No, everybody misses Mike Leach. Everybody love that guy.
There are Saturday mornings God, I miss that guy.
Yeah. And as far as the Grammy meme, stones and glass houses, John. I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you.
That'll do it for us. We say good night. Go Devils. Forks up. Crush the Cougs. Dilly dilly.
Dilly dilly.